Hi guys, I'm James McIntosh, and today I'm joined alongside Eastleigh man Luis Fernandez, looking back over his career, his journey in non-league so far, and even looking into the player's future. Lewis, we were just saying before we actually got into the call, we've known about this podcast idea now for the last 2 years. Looking forward to finally getting underway then today.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, it's been a long time coming. We've spoke a bit over the last few years, but I'm happy to finally sit down with you and have a conversation.
Well, it should be for a really good episode, Lewis. But I'm going to start out with some recent cup news. So we were also speaking about this actually beforehand as well. You did beat Basford in the first round of the FA Trophy, and now you have been drawn away to Altrincham. Good draw in your opinion?
Uh, yeah, obviously would have. There was a few teams in there that we would have rather, and we wanted a home draw because we haven't actually played at home yet in the cup. But yeah, either way, it's a good draw. It's a good draw. We've been to Altrincham this season and won there, so we'll be going there positive. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose from every player's point of view in this competition, it gives every non-league player a good chance to get to Wembley through FA trophies, FA Vases runs.
Yeah, yeah. Obviously, everyone will say the cliche thing, "Oh, we take one game at a time," and obviously we've got a lot of league games from now till then. But you can't help but wait and see the draw today, knowing that if you can beat the team that you get drawn against, you're one game closer to Wembley. It's all you really think about when it comes to that cup.
Well, definitely, and I hope to see Eastleigh get to Wembley at one point. Lewis, if you get to Wembley, I think you have to invite me down. I'll do the commentary for
Yeah,
the
no,
game.
of
Well,
course, you'll be more than welcome to come down.
well, I wish you all the best, mate, and I'll definitely come down to an Eastleigh game at some point. But Lewis, take me back to when you were growing up. So take me back to how you originally got into football, and where did you find your love for the game?
It's just a typical story, really. I was just growing up playing with friends at Sunday League with um obviously wherever I could play, wherever my friends was playing, I just wanted to play. And then it sort of kicked off when I moved to one Sunday League club around my area called Broomfield, which is now Pro Direct. And then yeah, it was just a contact there where obviously I only joined there because a few of my friends were there. And then from there, that's where I first got pushed into an academy. So it was just a typical kid loving football on a Sunday morning, really. That's all it started at.
So did you have any visions of going pro from an early age?
Yeah, obviously, from literally reception, all my mum always says to me, when you was younger, you always had a football in your hand. Like you would have never seen me without a football or not in a football kit. So all I wanted to do was play football for fun, really. And then yeah, thankfully, it's turned into my job, and I enjoy doing it every day.
And I've got to ask this. It may seem a bit of a cliche question, but every time I seem to ask a footballer this, they never say they started out in their natural position. So I had a striker on a few months ago. You may know him, Craig McIlsmith. He used to play for Scotland.
Yeah, yeah, I was
Yeah.
with him at Stevenage.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But you mentioned, I think he started out as a centre back, eventually became a striker. So I wouldn't be all too surprised if you started out as a striker or something.
No, you're right. To be fair, so I
Really?
literally I started playing. I started playing up front. I think, 7 years old, and I was playing with the under nine. So I was playing a few years up front. Um, and then as the years went on, I just got pushed further and further back the pitch, and I never actually played centre half. I never played centre back until I went in on trial at Stevenage, and they said, "Oh, we think you'd be a perfect centre back." And then that was my first ever game at centre back in the academy at Stevenage.
Well, I have to admit, I thought some of your idols would have been Sergio Ramos growing up, looking at some of your sliding challenges. But it's such a weird question, I suppose, because so many players they have a similar story to that, and it's where realistically through the academy they start getting molded professionally. And talking about how you got scouted, when did this eventually come? So you mentioned you were with that Pro Direct Academy beforehand,
Yeah.
where it was a club beforehand. Did it all stimulate from that?
Yeah, literally. So the owner of that club, at the time, he came through the ranks at Stevenage himself. So it was sort of a blessing that he was there and he was able to put my name forward. Obviously, I was performing well at the Sunday League level, and then yeah, it just came through him sort of recommending me. And then before I knew it, I was in on trial, and it was a 6 week trial period. And then yeah, I got offered I got offered a contract after 4 weeks of it. So that's how that came about.
And you mentioned before you were only 13 when you did eventually get scouted for Stevenage. And I'm
Mm,
sure you would have been playing alongside players in that academy where they had been there since they were 7, 8 maybe. And I've recently watched a documentary. It was involving a journalist, and he said I think it's pro league teams now. So they're like some Manchester City, Arsenal. They'd be scouting kids at the ages of 3, 4, which I find absolutely staggering. But coming through the ranks when you were 13, do you feel like that's an appropriate age where young players should start be getting into an academy? And do you feel like there should be certain restrictions where we should eventually limit how young a player can be before joining an academy?
yeah, I do. To be fair, like obviously, I wouldn't know the side of playing for an academy at such a young age, but from speaking just from my experience, I know for a fact that I'm grateful I had that Sunday league period in my life because then that really grew my love for it. Because when you do step into an academy, obviously every academy is different, and Stevenage was a brilliant academy, but it becomes a lot more real. So it's not always just about the love; it's about they're a business ultimately, and
Hmm.
ultimately I was lucky in a way where I got to stay Sunday league for so long where I actually got the enjoyment side of it, because as soon as you go into an academy it gets very serious. So I think every kid should be able to go and play with their friends and really enjoy football before it gets quite serious, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned about how serious it is, especially for youngsters coming in. So a lot of the people I've had on the podcast before, they have been scouted at a young age. A lot of the older ones, where they were brought into an academy, they weren't made of the aware of the risks at all. Their parents weren't really told about it, and it's almost like there's a certain naivety when going into academy. It's almost like there's a thought where they think it's guaranteed they're going to eventually make it as a pro one day. You're a bit of a younger player yourself, so I'm sure it might have been better the academies back then. But when you were coming up, were your parents or even yourself made aware of it's a very small chance of making it as a pro one day?
um to be fair, I think, yeah, you sort of know that there's always stats around the club where how many children went from the academy to the actual first team. It is a rarity. So yeah, I would say you're made aware, but I think there could be more done in a sense of, if you don't make it, what could they potentially do to help you away from that? Because ultimately, when you're in academy, you have to sacrifice a lot. So myself talking, for example, I sat within 4 weeks of signing for the academy. I had moved school to Stevenage's school, so I was traveling 2 hours a day, and
Wow.
you sacrifice a lot. So I think, yeah, they do let you know, they make you aware of the situation. Not everyone's going to make it, of course, but there could maybe be a bit more done in terms of what happens when they do release you. Are they building a path for you away from football? I think that could be something to be looked at.
And you mentioned about that path there. Was that always included when you were at the academy? So I know you get the likes of Arsenal and Man City that I keep alluding to. With their documentaries, it shows that they do quite heavily in education now. So every player that does go into an academy, they have to do a degree almost alongside it. So maybe in sports science. Stevenage, I'm not sure if they had the links with universities or even the money to be able to execute that. Did you find you were quite well executed though with education form when you were at the academy and they were trying to help
Um,
with that?
Once you get to youth team level, it's very good. You've got your college programs, and a lot of my teammates from my youth team would have gone on to use their diplomas and stuff that they got through Stevenage. But if I look back, a lot of my teammates from under 14s to under 16s, once they got released at Stevenage, it was like, you're done here. Um, that's not to discredit Stevenage because they do look after their players very well. But yeah, it's sort of like maybe there could be something alongside that. But once you get to the youth team level, there's coaching badges, there's all sorts to
Hmm.
sort of, yeah, help you in that way. So yeah, it's a bit of both really. The older you get, the more they look after you, really.
Well, luckily, you didn't need to worry about getting released or anything because in the academy, you had a very good run. So I was looking at some of your stats through the academy. I think it was when you were in the under 16s team, you played for the under 18s FA Trophy match against Middlesbrough. And can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so that was, yeah. So I was in year 11 at the time, and I remember I was just in school, and I got a phone call to say that I'm playing with the youth team in the, obviously, FA Youth Cup, which is a massive thing. It's probably the biggest part of being a youth team footballer at an academy, the FA Youth Cup. So yeah, that was it was like a dream come true at the time. Like I couldn't believe it. To step into the under 18s and play. at the stadium. Ultimately, it was my first time playing in a professional stadium. So yeah, that was a highlight of my career, really, in my youth career. Yeah.
Well, as you said, it must have been nuts for such a young player, only being 16 yourself there. Once you initially played that one game already with the under 18s, did you find you started becoming more regular with the under 18s and you started being drifted a lot more into the under 18s squad at that point?
Yeah, so when I was under 16s, I'm pretty sure I started, I'd say, a good 75% of the games for the youth team that year. Um,
Wow.
so yeah, I was sort of playing up. I had a good bond with all the boys in that age group. So yeah, ultimately that helped in my development, and it helped me push on to get my scholar at the end of that season.
Well, you definitely executed yourself well. You mentioned about how you came through the ranks with the under 18s. Actually, when you were 17 years old, you made I think it was your first men's debut, wasn't it, against Southend? Find that absolute staggering. A player so young can make their debut at that age. And once again, that must have been such a surreal experience playing with the men's team at 17.
Yeah, it was the exact same feeling, really, like just a bit on a higher level, of course. So it was the same thing. I've gone in on the day, thinking I'd be on the bench because I was a second year scholar at the time, but I spent the whole pre-season pretty much with the first team. So then, yeah, I got into the changing room that day, and then the gaffer pulled me to the side and just said, "Oh," he picked up the whiteboard, and I saw my name in the starting 11. So it was the exact same. Like my heart dropped, and I was feeling all sorts of emotions, like nervous but excited as well. And I had a really good game that game as well. And it ultimately, I think within a week after that, I played another 2 games in the league. So
Well,
yeah, it was good.
exactly. I was going to say exactly that. I mean, once you did that, I think you got rated the man of the match performance by your manager, Dino Mamaria. I might butcher that
Yeah.
name there. You got given that man of the match performance. You would go on to play those extra 2 games. I mean, being 17, that must have attracted at least, you would have thought it would have attracted some maybe interest from other teams around the league, being that young in particular.
Yeah, I think my age helped. Obviously, it's rare to see a 17-year-old go and play 3 games in 7 days, two in the like the football league and one in the Carabao Cup. It's rare, um, being at that age, and obviously, I was just enjoying my football at the time. I earned my first professional contract off the back of it, so I wasn't too fussed about any sort of interest or anything. I felt like the star boy at the time, and I was just enjoying the moment.
And it must have been such a relief getting that pro contract.
Yes, yeah, I remember the day clearly. To be fair, yeah, it was ultimately what I worked my whole life for. So that first contract feeling was, I don't think that feeling can be matched.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's pretty much, as you said, every young player's dream, I would say, getting that pro contract. And then, especially starting on a more regular basis for Stevenage in the second season, did you feel any pressure going into the season, already having started a few games for the men's team?
Um, no, not so much pressure on an individual basis. I think the club was struggling at the time. We was in a relegation scrap, so that's where most of the pressure come from. And ultimately, I came through the academy. I spent my whole childhood in the area, going to school around there. So I sort of I felt like I owed the club a lot, and I didn't really want to see the club struggling like that. So that was the only real pressure I felt within that situation. Obviously, being so young, the nerves were a lot different back then, and you'd feel nervous before every game. But yeah, there wasn't so much pressure on myself. It was more just for the club.
And you mentioned about how Stevenage, they were in that relegation scrap at the time, I would like to think. I think you were in League Two, weren't you? And the league below would have been
Yeah.
National League, obviously. When the club is in that sort of stance, I'm not sure how it would have affected the academy, but often I would say it's a few months in between, really, before eventually any outcome does exist. But a lot of the clubs, they look for trying to reduce funds if that was the worst case. They try and look for contingency plans. I'm not sure if that would have affected the academy because obviously they didn't get relegated in the end. But were you ever having discussions that there might have been a possibility that youngsters could have been dropped like yourself just to try and free up wage books?
Yeah, I remember. I remember speaking to one of the coaches at the academy, and obviously at the time you don't realise the knock-on effect of a club being relegated. Obviously you're young, you're new to it. But I remember speaking to him and him saying about how it could jeopardise his career, like his life if Stevenage get relegated, and that hit home a bit. You don't realise the knock-on effect. But I think that I think the EFL or the LFE there's some sort of system where you've got a 2-year parachute plan. I'm pretty
Oh,
sure. So
okay.
they look after academies two up to 2 years after a club's relegated. So there is guidelines in place to help clubs financially and that. So that's always a good thing.
Yeah, I didn't know about any of that. So actually, yeah, really good from the FA with that matter. Actually,
Yeah, I'm
obviously,
pretty sure that's still a thing. I'm sure I remember that. Don't quote me on that, but yeah, I'm pretty sure.
yeah. Well, it's a brilliant contingency if that is in place for pretty
Mm.
much any EFL teams that might be, consider that yo-yo club between League Two and Vanarama National League, obviously. But eventually, Lewis, you did. I would say you struggled with game time a little bit with Stevenage, and that probably forced your move into Oxford City.
Yeah, so it was just natural, really. I was young, couldn't be promised the game time that I would have liked. Obviously, any game time at that age at the first team was, if I had played just one game the whole season, I would have been happy with that. Looking back at the time, so obviously, yeah, they wanted me to ultimately go and develop my career and play consistently. And then yeah, that's when I went to Oxford City. The manager at the time, he was the assistant when I made my debut at Stevenage. So he was my assistant at Stevenage and then got the job at Oxford. So that link
Wow.
helped. Yeah, and then that's how that move came about.
Yeah, well, realistically, I would say football is heavily contact, so who you know. And I suppose that
Yeah,
massively helped with your move as well. When you eventually were trying to mingle with his squad, he would have probably helped introduce you better.
yeah, 100%. He was a top guy, really good guy. So he knew what I was about. I knew what he was about. So it was very easy for me to settle in and know what to expect, what he could expect from me, and what I could expect from him. And yeah, that the group at the time was such an easy group to settle into that when I went in, yeah, we had some good successes before COVID hit.
Yeah, definitely. And still going back to that move, dropping down to non-league, I feel like with a lot of players, there's a certain complacency when dropping down from the EFL to non-league. With you, were there any hesitations before dropping down and making that switch?
Um, no hesitations at all. I wanted to experience National League or men's football consistently at the time. So if I had to drop down, I was more than happy to do that, which I did. Um, and yeah, I didn't know much about the level at the time because ultimately I was always focused on Stevenage. So it was nice to sort of go down 2 levels and experience the level and find out a lot more about football in general.
And you mentioned about how your assistant manager at the time, he was the main man at Oxford, obviously. And often, I would say non-league is very heavily associated to being almost like a family. And did you notice that straight away when joining Oxford?
Yeah, straight away. To be fair, Oxford, again, I can't say a bad word about that club. It was a very good club, and you find that the non-league clubs are very much, as you said, family. It feels like a family. It's all very small, connected. The fans, the players, everything. It's just like it's like a small community in non-league. So yeah, that, as I said, it helped. It helped a lot.
Well, definitely. I think the support is definitely it's a lot different from EFL teams. So you'll go and have a beer with the fans after the game, and I suppose this is an element that you definitely liked.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Every both clubs I've been at National League South level. It's like that. To be fair, you're in the clubhouse after with the fans, and you form relationships. So um, yeah, I think still speak to a lot of the Hampton and Richmond fans where I was. There's still a few Oxford fans that I speak to occasionally. So yeah, it's nice. It's nice you make friends there.
And equally on the other end of the spectrum, you do have some raucous atmospheres in non-league. When you travel to an away team, I mean, there's some brilliant ones in the National League. I'm sure you've experienced. Any team that pops out to mind when I say raucous fans?
What in terms of bad atmosphere or
Um, no, not so
um
much bad, just funny.
um to be fair, not so much really. I just every team in non-league, I sort of, because I've got long hair, they're always coming for me. So
Oh yeah.
most weeks at non-league I was getting it. But nah, non-league's a good community. To be fair, it's all banter.
Well, I was going to say, to be fair, I think it's either normally the goalkeeper that gets it a lot. I would find it with our level, or we've got this player called Tom Smith. I'm hoping to interview him next week. Actually, he plays for
Nice.
Taunton. Got a ginger mullet. So you can
Yeah,
imagine, you can imagine what he gets with it. But absolutely
yeah.
insane stuff. And also going back to your time at Oxford, you said about it briefly beforehand. Before COVID hit, you were actually doing quite well on the pitch as well, and I think you did pretty well in the FA Trophy. So we mentioned about having an exciting cup run. You made it to the quarterfinals, and considering that was your first spell in non-league, not bad at all.
No, yeah, that was my first experience in the FA Trophy. I didn't know much about it really. I sort of stepped in, played a few games, and before I knew it, the boys were saying that we was like 2 or 3 wins away from Wembley. So that was new to me and exciting. And yeah, even the FA Cup, we had a nice little run in that. We played a few games on TV. We beat Northampton in round one, and we lost in the last kick of the extra time to Shrewsbury. So we had a nice little run and did Oxford City proud. So yeah, that was a good occasion.
It hit in 2020, stopping all football for a long time. I'm not sure if that would have been during your time at Oxford or just slightly after. But from a non-league player point of view, I wasn't really involved with non-league beforehand. Did you see a massive, almost spike in fans coming to games? And did you feel an instant Jekyll and Hyde before and after almost involving non-league?
So I was actually, yeah, it was when I was on loan when the league stopped. So I was out on loan at Oxford at the time, and I remember the league stopped. So it happened so quick that it was like 1 week we was playing a game on a Saturday, and by the next Saturday the league had finished. So I didn't see a spike. It just felt like a quick flash and it was over. But we were still in the FA Trophy at the time, and that cup carried on. So we were still in training. Obviously there was guidelines in place, and it was a weird time. But yeah, for myself, obviously I still had my parent club in terms of Stevenage, and we were still in. So no, I didn't really have to feel that pressure of COVID really, where I'm lucky. So
Yeah, because speaking to a few players, they kind of lost their love for football, I would say, during the COVID era. So when they had a few weeks off, they a lot of the ones in more, I would say, low teams, so probably step 7, step 8, maybe, they just gave up football. I'm guessing that didn't really cross your mind, considering it was still mainly your base career at the time.
yeah, no, I was still in contract at Stevenage, so we was being sent runs every day because no one knew how long it was going to last. So we were still getting paid. We were still having to provide evidence every day of us completing runs and staying fit. So nothing really changed for me. It was just the fact I wasn't physically going in. I was just having to go running in the park. But no, everything stayed professional from me. So that never crossed my mind at all.
So when football did eventually start getting back together and we started getting more normality back again in the game, you returned from your spell at Oxford. And was the aim to try and maybe force your way back in the Stevenage lineup again and try and fight for a jersey maybe again?
Yeah, so the club at the time, we had actually been relegated, but Macclesfield went bust that year.
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah.
it actually kept us in the football league, but we didn't know until 2 weeks before the season started. So it was a bit of a up and down period for the club. They didn't know what league they was going to be in. They didn't know what they was recruiting for. Everything was up in the air. So I was just focusing on sort of making sure I came back pre-season fit, doing all the right things, and then hoping the club situation, wherever they was, I was going to get given a chance. And we stayed in the football league, and then that season I went out on loan to the National League. Yeah.
I was going to say, so obviously Stevenage, they had a huge possibility of getting relegated if Macclesfield obviously didn't go down. Do you feel almost that dented your chances of maybe making it in the Stevenage lineup because of that?
Um, Looking back, I reckon I would have been maybe trusted a bit more, yeah, in the National League rather than League Two. But um, nah, not so much. I try not. Well, I've never really thought of it like that. I just thought whatever league they was in, we already signed a lot of players. So we signed a few defenders, older, experience. So I knew it was going to be tough for me. So yeah, that's how I just thought the best thing for me would be to go out on loan and play regularly, where it was sort of more guaranteed.
And like you said, that loan coming up next was Kingsland Town, obviously in the
Yeah.
National League, so it was another jump once again. Were there any offers on the table? Any other ones aside from Kingsland Town?
Um, Trying to think what year that was. Um,
I
I think
think
I
it
had
would.
a few. I had a few in the National League South, of course, but no, it was mainly just Kings Lynn. I went in and played a game with Woking that season in the pre-season, but I can't remember if that was the season before. Um, but yeah, I was close to going on loan to Woking. I think that season, but I don't know what happened between the two clubs, but that never came about. So yeah, it was Kings Lynn, which I was more than happy with anyway.
And then picking a team as well. How much is it based on what the player wants and what the manager wants, and also what the club wants as well? I suppose.
Um, yes, I think it has to be a perfect fit for everyone. It has to be perfect for Stevenage at the time to know I'm going to develop there because ultimately I'm still their player. They still want me to come back better. Otherwise, they're wasting their time sending me out and I'm wasting my time going. Kings Lynn at the time, obviously, what they need, and then me, what system I'm going to be playing in, what's going to make me a better player. So yeah, it was obviously Kings Lynn sort of molded that in terms of how they wanted to play and how the manager trusted young players. So Stevenage were happy for me to go there, and yeah, it just sort of fitted at the time.
Well, definitely. And I think Kingsland Town, they're a team that, as you said, they base a lot of philosophy off of loaning out young players, bringing them in and trying to develop young pros. And in the National League, it's probably a perfect scenario for players like yourself, trying to almost get more game time in a better league as well, a better standard. Obviously, Kingsland Town, they weren't one of the bigger teams in the National League. Did you go in knowing that obviously the main aim was to try and stay up, but was there any possibility or was there any almost warning from the manager that you were going to know you were going to be in a relegation scrap at the time?
Um, no, not well. Yeah, obviously Kings Lynn. Everyone knew from the outside, like it was a little fish in a big pond, Kings Lynn, because the National League at the time we had Notts County, Wrexham. There were some big hitters in the league,
Mm.
Chesterfield. So we knew it was going to be a struggle in terms of the budget we had compared to most other teams in the league. But I think everyone was looking at it from a selfish point of view. I just needed to go get games anyway. But we had a we had a good manager at the time who we trusted in. We signed some good players who sort of boosted the morale around the place, and we believed we could achieve something that year. And ultimately, it didn't really work out. And yeah, that was my first experience getting relegated. So it wasn't great, but yeah,
Well, taking the positives out of a bad scenario, I suppose out of all the teams you've probably been with, Kingsland Town probably almost made you the best in terms of mentality, probably tested you the most in that terms of the game.
yeah, yeah. I think when I look back at it now, obviously it was good to get that experience of getting relegated. As bad as it is, it was good to get that experience at such a young age because it's not a nice feeling at all. You want to achieve things in life. To get relegated was a horrible feeling, one I don't want to have again. So it's probably a good thing that I actually experienced that, and ultimately was at a club where I got to play 30 odd games in the National League at 18. Not many people do that as a defender. So um, yeah, personally, got a lot out of that loan considering the season we had.
Yeah, definitely. Because obviously, a lot of players in the National League, it's either sink or swim for a lot of youngsters in that league. And obviously, I would say getting that game time, it definitely tested you both physically and mentally. And when you eventually made a drop down to Hampton and Richmond, I'm not going to say it was easy, but obviously made the scenarios a lot better for when you did join them.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Sort of stepped into that move at Hampton um, with a good arrogance about it, if that makes sense. So I stepped into Hampton knowing I've just played 30 games in the National League. Let me go there and play consistently every week in a winning team. And yeah, that's obviously I stepped in with confidence, and it helped because you could see that on the pitch when I was playing at Hampton.
Yeah, definitely. And once game was Hampton and Richmond the obvious choice after leaving Stevenage.
Yeah, I think a lot of clubs at National League South I spoke to that season. Um, and yeah, after going in and meeting Gary McCann, the manager at the time, yeah, I walked out of the office knowing I wanted to sign there. It was just about, I, I, I knew I'd be so happy there. And I didn't really want to meet anyone else after that. I just wanted to get the contract signed as soon as possible.
And another one of the interesting points, I suppose it was a bit similar to Kingsland Town, but at the time, Hampton and Richmond, they were still a very young team. So I was looking at some of the players. You had Liam Vincent, Adam Levers. They were only 21, 23. Yourself being another young defender. And was this another one of the drawing points, being part of a quite frequent young team?
Yeah, it was that. Obviously, it's exciting when everyone's young. You know, there's going to be quality with the players you just mentioned who have come through academies. Obviously, Adam at Wickham, Liam at Portsmouth. You know, there's going to be quality as well as youthfulness. So that was a big factor as well. But yeah, the manager Gary, yeah, I really wanted to play for him at the time. So that was the main point, really.
And you would go on to be a main starter for Hampton and Richmond. And looking over the last few seasons, I mean, pretty much they're always a mid-table team. And I feel like with Hampton and Richmond, they're very consistent always. So you know what you're going to get with them. I think they're currently mid-table at the moment, but I know one of the players, Chris Campbell. I'm not sure if you know him, but he says he enjoys playing for them. He knows what he's going to get. And almost, do you think this is what you needed in terms of your career? You needed a bit of consistency after obviously getting relegated the season beforehand and struggling with game time sometimes at Stevenage.
Yeah. So as you said, as your mate said, you know what you're going to get with Hampton. I didn't know what to expect when I went in terms of the club as a whole. But it blew my mind away. It's, the club, there's like, I loved it so much I can't even explain. I think I went in and obviously it got off to a bad start. I picked up quite a serious injury, so I saw myself out for the first 5 months, which was frustrating. But the club stuck by me as they do for all their players. They're a very good club, and then focused on getting back fit. And then yeah, I just made some amazing memories at Hampton. Played consistently, which helped ultimately develop me. Um, and yeah, I haven't got a bad word to say about the club. Yeah, they looked after me as much as I played for the club and the badge, so it was all good.
And your second season, I think that was the season that really made you by looking at your stats, in my opinion anyway. I think you did get voted the players player of the season, so clearly they agreed with me as well. At what point did you start getting interest from other teams, maybe in the National League, one being obviously Eastleigh?
So it was actually at the end of my first season. I did have one offer in the National League, but where my season was sort of where I was put out long term for an injury. I think there was a small risk behind me going in back full time without my injury fully healing. So I made the decision really that I wanted to stay at Hampton for another year. I left it quite late. I left it just before the preseason started. I decided, no, I want to stay here and get a consistent 40, 50 games this year, which I needed because I missed half the season before. I wanted to prove I can play a whole season at a high standard within myself. So yeah, about halfway through that second season was when things really picked up for me. We was doing well as a team. I think we were second by Christmas. And then going into that January, had one bid from a National League team, but I saw Hampton as an opportunity to get playoffs, and I wanted to stay there. I was loving football, so I didn't really want to leave at the time. I wanted to stay with the boys, stay with the manager. And then yeah, we just missed out on playoffs, and then I just saw it as my time to sort of say goodbye to the club. And then yeah, signed at Eastleigh.
So joining Eastleigh, I know at the time, I'm not sure if their manager was Kevin Davis at the time, but if he was the
Yeah,
manager at it, oh, so he was the manager at the time.
yeah.
Obviously a legendary figure in football as a whole. So I know he was the Southampton goalkeeper for a long time. And going in, I'm not sure if he would have played a defensive philosophy, but obviously being a goalkeeper, you don't hear many goalkeepers becoming managers. Obviously being a defender yourself, I suppose there was that already linked straight away.
Yeah, so as you said, like I never heard of a goalkeeper being a manager
No.
before Hampton, but both my managers, I had two managers at Hampton, and both of them played as goalkeeper. So this is
Wow,
actually my
wow.
my last three managers have all been goalkeepers. So yeah, I think goalkeepers just like me and they like to sign me really. But yeah, no, he sort of seen the season that I had along with our assistant Danny Butterfield, who came to watch me a few times. So I think, yeah, they just watched me and thought I'd be a good match for the club.
And obviously, I know you mentioned about all three of those managers there, obviously being goalkeepers. Would you say they all play quite a defensive philosophy then, style of football?
Um, nah, all three managers have they've all been different in terms of their personalities, in terms of their footballing styles. They've all been good managers as people as well. They've been good people. But no, I wouldn't say so. I'd say they've all had different mixtures. I'd say all three managers have been very structural, and they like to have a good structure. So maybe that's something that goalkeepers like. But yeah, not so much defensively. Nah.
And we also spoke about how it's a big jump up, isn't it, from National League South to National League? You would have played a few times in League Two, obviously. How big do you think that gap is now between League Two and National League? Obviously, National League, even in Eastleigh, you've got the likes of Paul McCallum, Maguire, the former Sunderland man. Is it really that big of a jump now, would you say?
Not anymore. No, I'd say there's not much in it at all. Really, you see clubs go up from this league and they don't struggle at all in League Two. If you look at Bromley this year, for example, and then clubs come down and they don't go to absolutely win the league by a clear margin. So I wouldn't say there's a big difference at all. No. Ultimately, every team in this league, pretty much every team is now full time, so it's a professional league, and it's such a good standard now. It's probably the best it's ever been
Yeah,
in the
definitely.
last few years.
I was going to say, I think it even shows in all the title races. So even looking at almost not looking at the players, but looking at off the field. So you see all the TV rights, how much money's been invested into National League, and even looking at Eastleigh. So I was looking at some of your Instagram posts and the amount of fans you get at the game. So I always see you signing autographs. You're involved with a lot of the social media, obviously. So I saw that one video of you doing the van. I have to admit, that was a class announcement. But
Yeah.
I think just as a whole, it looks like Eastleigh, as well as a lot of National League teams, they're all heading in the right direction, just off the field, as well as on the field as well.
No, yeah, that's one key factor that drew me into Eastleigh. Really, obviously spoke with a few clubs, but Eastleigh, away from the footballing side as well, is such a good club in terms of the people around it, the facilities, just this whole principle and family feeling behind the club is such a nice club to play for, and yeah, there's no sort of divide. It feels like a proper community club, so it's enjoyable. Yeah.
But something that has been causing a lot of controversy, I would say, this season is the new National League Cup, where obviously National League teams, they're playing youth Premier League teams. I think it's Manchester United, they can play Arsenal, Blackburn, all teams in the Premier League too. So a lot of youngsters they're playing. Obviously, with National League teams, it's cramping a lot more games in. And I think the main frustration is National League teams, they had their FA Cup replay scrap. Obviously, that caused a lot of controversy as well. But obviously, you came through the ranks at Stevenage, so you've been in an academy point of view. How do you feel about this cup? And can you understand why fans are so against it, including your club, Eastleigh?
Um, yeah, I can understand. I can understand why clubs are against it as well, because it costs a lot of money for a football club to open up for an evening game, get the floodlights on and host an evening game. So, and it's not something that people, especially in this day and age, will want to spend their hard work money on to come and watch, if that makes sense. It's not a league, it's not the league, it's not the FA Cup. So I do understand from a finance point of view. I know there's big prize money in that cup, but from a finance point of view, for me, it doesn't really make sense. But I guess it could be seen as a good idea. It could also give some clubs an opportunity to look at these 21s players that they're playing against and maybe get some loans. So there's good and bad behind the situation.
And if you would have been involved with this competition, obviously players, we hear it so much, even in the Premier League, you hear it in National League, even in the Southern League. If you would have been in that scenario where you would have been playing in the National League Cup, do you think you would have tried to not escape it? Because I think Kevin Davis would have obviously made you if you had to. But do you think there would have been a lot of nonchalant players out there where they just wouldn't give anything towards the cup and just not bother really playing to their best standards?
If Are you saying as if I'm playing for the National League club
So
or if
if
I'm
you
an
were
academy
playing,
player?
so if you were playing for a National League club, someone like
Oh,
Aldershot maybe.
obviously you'd get that. I do believe you'd get that. It just depends on the sort of person. Obviously some people haven't got it in them to not give everything. I don't see myself as that sort of person. I'd always give everything. You'd be wasting your time if you're turning up not wanting to play because you have to play ultimately. Um, But yeah, I do think there would be some boys that they would have been starting every game in the league, and they want to rest. This ultimately it's just another fixture that's not really necessary. Yeah.
Well, definitely. And I think it's a very interesting point involving this National League Cup. But I'm going to leave it for the moment and instead I'm going to return back to the National League. So we've said about how Eastleigh, at the moment, I'd say they're mid-table at the moment. Do you feel come the end of season you're going to be trying to push for playoffs, or are you happy where you are at the moment?
No, we want to be pushing for playoffs 100%. I think a lot of people won't maybe expect Eastleigh to push for the playoffs, but we believe in the changing room we can. We believe there's enough quality in that team. We've got some players that are established at this level, and we do think we can push for that. So we've got that in-house belief, and that's all that really matters to us. Hope come the end of the season we can prove to people as well that we have got that quality.
And what do you think Eastleigh do need to do in order to get to that playoff stage?
Just need to keep doing what we're doing. Really, we've had a good start to the season. We had a very good start, and then we had a bit of a patch where we wasn't getting results, but that's going to happen in every season. So we just need to stay consistent in what we're doing and focus on ourselves, keep getting better individually and as a team. And yeah, we're obviously halfway through the season and we're only 4 or 5 points off it. So yeah, it is achievable. We see it as achievable, and we just need to believe it and show it.
And I suppose if you got promotion with the Spitfires, that'd be the ultimate goal, returning back to the EFL with them.
Yeah, 100%. No one would have had us down to get promoted this season if outside the changing room and outside the club. So yeah, we'd like to do that and sort of prove a point about this football club, because it is a well-run club, well-run community club. So we'd like to just push it a bit further. Just the goal really, and just, I signed here knowing that was the goal.
Yeah, definitely. And hopefully Eastleigh can get that. But Lewis, looking maybe 5 years into the future, where can you see yourself being? Maybe League One, League Championship, maybe even Premier League, do you reckon?
um, I've never really thought about the Premier League really. Obviously, that's what I used to think about as a kid. But I'll just say it's going to sound so cliche, but I've never really looked long term. Obviously, it's in the back of your mind. You always think, where am I going to be in 5 years? But ultimately, I think where I am next year defines where I am in 5 years anyway. So I always just try to take it one small step at a time. I want to be a consistent player at Eastleigh, playing every week, and then that's when I then start thinking what's next. And until I've ticked that off, I can't really think of what's next. That's the way I work in my mind. So
Yeah, definitely. And I think I'm a very similar person with that aspect of thinking. I almost like you don't want to think too near into the future, but you still want to have that plan if that makes sense. And
yeah.
linking back to that idea as well, have you ever thought about maybe what life is going to come to after football? Do you reckon you can maybe one day be a manager? And if so, have you even started looking into that pathway?
I don't think I'd be a manager. No, I wouldn't mind being an assistant or a
Okay,
sort of
yeah.
coach at a club. I wouldn't want to be a manager, but I'd like to be that, maybe the man that everyone can go to, if that makes sense. The one who
Yeah.
sort of who's got the connection between the players and the staff. But no, I did look at this season. I've been looking at opportunities away from football, just because I've never done anything else. There's just a few different things, and I don't want to rush into anything. I will start something up soon to sort of set me up long term. But yeah, ultimately, it's just about picking what's right, and whether that's within sport or out of sport. I'm not too sure yet. I haven't really ventured into that yet.
Well, Lewis, I'm sure you're going to smash it, whatever you do in the future. And just to round off this podcast, I asked my post, so my Instagram followers, a few questions, what they wanted to ask you. So I'm going to ask you, I
Yeah,
think it's 5 or 6 last questions. Not really
that's
quick
fine.
fire, but you might have to think about some of them, shall we say.
Yeah.
This is quite an interesting one to start off with. A lot of fans ask me this involving players, but who is the best player you've played with and the best player you've also played against?
Um, Best player I've played with. Oh,
Always a struggle, this one, I find.
yeah. It always is, because played with some good players. That the maddest thing is, some players that I played with, the best players I played with, have actually gone on to not really make it,
Oh,
which is the
really?
maddest thing. Yeah, it's the maddest thing coming through like Stevenage and stuff. But I would say Josh Barrett, I'd imagine you know him
Okay,
at
yeah.
Aldershot. We was at Kings Lynn together, and he could do things with a football that I haven't seen before. Like it was also Rob Hall. I was with him at Hampton. He's had a very good career. He's a bit old now, but he's the same. Like you could see the natural ability. Very good player. And then was the other one played against?
Played against, yeah. Normally, I
Um,
find players find this question easier based on academies
yeah,
they played with.
probably Ivan Toney. Um,
Wow, that is a big
yeah,
one.
played against Ivan Toney. Obviously, at the time, it wasn't my hardest game.
Mm.
Like in terms of man v man. Not saying I could defend against Ivan Toney. I'm just saying that, but to see what he's gone on to do after that, he was at Peterborough at the time, and to see him scoring
Mm.
every week in the Prem, it was sort of a moment where I could be like, oh, I've played against him when I'm watching him on TV.
I was going to say, I bet you had a few bragging rights when he was in the Euros,
Yeah,
and I'm pretty sure he got one of the winning penalties.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, but that's awesome. And probably that question I asked, it might heavily link with this one. Who is the most famous person in your contacts? So looking through it, I reckon you would have some good ones.
Most famous person in my contact. Um,
See, this is the one where I'll get shocked. You'll probably have a
that's
famous actor in there or somewhere.
no, I've got. This is the thing. I actually couldn't tell you. I've got phone numbers, like so many phone numbers that I don't even know half the people I've actually got. But
I
probably,
suppose like Instagram, Twitter, that could count. Who you're friends with on that?
yeah. Um, I've got someone, but I can't say who. Yeah, I'll probably. Uh,
Go on, Lewis. You've left it on a cliffhanger. I think you've got to tell us now.
no, I'll say Rob Hall. He's played in the Premier League, so I've got a few Premier League players. Yeah, so I'll just go Rob Hall, my friend. I text him the most out of the famous contacts I
Mm.
got, so I'll just go with him.
No, that's fair enough, to be fair. And linking back to this is definitely going to be a question you like watching some of your Instagram videos. What is the favourite tag call you've ever committed? So the best challenge you've ever made?
Best challenge I've ever made. There's two blocks that I've made that spring to mind. One was on my debut against Southend. I blocked a shot, pretty much from point blank range. And then the second one was for Kings Lynn in the FA Trophy, or FA Cup maybe against Peterborough Sport. I made probably the best goal line clearance I've made in my life. I can send it to you after this. To be
Yeah, I
fair,
was
you'll
going
be
to say you
impressed.
have to send it to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll send it to you after this.
Well, without being too modest, what would you give it a rating out of 10 then?
Oh, that block there is a 10 out of 10. I'll be honest.
No, no, fair enough. I like that. Actually, probably once again links to my next question. So, if National League, let's say they're included in FIFA, I'm not sure if you're a big FIFA player or not. I know you've got a FIFA card in the past, but what would you rate yourself in FIFA terms?
Oh,
Eh,
what was that last time? I was a bronze card last time, like 58 rated, I think. So
maybe bump
I'd
yourself
go,
up to a silver this time.
yeah, I'll probably go. You've got to think there's championship players who are silver, so I'll probably go 63. I'll give myself. I'm not that championship or League One standard yet, but I'll give myself a 63.
Well, linking back to FIFA once again, they're doing a Team of the Year promo at the moment. Reckon you would have got Team of the Year when it comes to National League?
Nah, not this. Maybe last season when I was playing consistently, but this season, I've been sort of played half the games. I haven't started every game, so I think I might just miss out on that.
Oh, fair enough, mate. And also, once again, I suppose this is also a challenging one where players have to think a bit. But what is your favourite memory in football? So you can name any time. So maybe when you were in Stevenage.
Yeah, my favourite memory in football was when I was at Stevenage. We was playing Leighton Orient away. It was just after my debut, and I was on the bench. And after 6 minutes, I came on, and I was 17 at the time, and I got man of the match. Kept a clean sheet, and it was the first time I heard the fans chanting my name, and they chanted it for the
Oh,
whole
wow.
game. Like my family was there, because my mum's a big Leighton Orient fan as well. So all my family was there, and it was just surreal hearing the whole stand chanting my name, and then seeing my my mum up there, and my brother just enjoying the moment. So that's my favourite memory.
No, that's class, Lewis. And finally, what would you give any advice to any aspiring pros growing up now?
Um, to any aspiring pros, it's just, I think, don't read too much into. Um, you got to look at yourself. You can't look at everyone else and think you deserve more than what you actually do. If that makes sense, I think you just have to make sure you're committed, working hard, doing everything right, correctly, living professionally, being professional, and yeah, it will take care of itself. I think there's not much advice other than do things properly. Don't try to look for an easy route or an sort of fast route. You just got to do things properly, and things will fall into place for you.
Brilliant stuff, Lewis. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you today. Hopefully, we can eventually draw Eastleigh some point, Gosport against Eastleigh. I have to try and
Yeah,
grab
that
a
would be
beer with
good.
you after the game. But
Yeah, that would be
been a
good.
pleasure speaking to you, mate. Any viewers listening, make sure to follow the podcast, watch any other ones you got on the channel. And Lewis, any final words to the audience?
No, just thank you for having me, James. I really appreciate your time, and yeah, I'm sure we'll speak in the near future anyway. So yeah, it was a pleasure to sit down and speak with you.
Well, perfect way to end it, Lewis. And yeah, see you in the next episode, guys.